I was looking through the questions, and a lot of times I want to lead the podcast with a question that addresses a lot of different programs, a lot of different fan bases. And so obviously this one was really good. I'm going to read you the question, and I wanted to go longer form on it, and I figured that this was the proper time to do it tonight. The question was, Josh, if you completely ignored current rosters, you completely ignored recent results, and you only evaluated based on a natural path to success, how would you rank the jobs in the SEC? And so I thought about what my criteria would be, because there are two camps here. They're kind of two different groups of teams that I think you have to, clusters of teams rather, that you have to drop a program into. You got cluster A, you got cluster B, but I thought about what would matter to me. If I'm a premier coach and I have offers from all 14 programs, where am I going and in what order? The first thing that I want to know is your financial resources. Obviously, I got to get yeses to every request that I make. I have to have immaculate facilities, and not only immaculate facilities, but I have to have you committed to year-over-year upgrades. We have to assess this stuff year over year, because nothing in this conference and nothing in this sport stays the same. If we're number one right now and we don't move, we'll be number 6 5 years from now. I have to have access to talent, and I have to be able to recruit talent. And also, and this is fourth for a reason, I'd love to have an established premier brand. And I'd love to have a trophy case full of hardware. I'd love to have rich tradition. I don't need it, because if I'm one of the best in the business, I think I can establish our tradition. And I think I can fill our trophy case. I can sell recruits on the concept of, you're coming here to play in the future, not the past. I'm controlling the future. You're controlling the future. So we'll take care of rewriting the record books here. It's nice to have that tradition. Like, I'm going to talk about Alabama in just a second. Wearing that A on the chest, that's really important. Being able to port to all those crystal footballs and those little gold statue footballs, it's really important. I don't think it's a necessity to win at the highest level. So with that, I had Ted whip together this graphic today, and he did it just like that. He had already sent it to Director Colin before I even knew it was finished. So Colin, let's show the people the list that I came up with here, and I'm going to tell you why I think what I think. I think Georgia is the best job in the Southeastern Conference. This changed for me not long after Kirby Smart got there. It was already near the top, but now to me it's at the top. If you know the history there, I've gone over it several times on this show. There were things I think that Mark Richt was being told no to, that Kirby Smart told him he was going to need yeses to, that were contingent on his being hired. They wanted Alabama results Saturday. They weren't willing to invest to an Alabama level Monday through Friday. You rest on Sunday, of course. Well, now they do. And so with that in mind, you can obviously recruit Georgia. You are the University of Georgia. You can easily get into Florida. You can easily get into the Carolinas. You've got great facilities there. You've got every commitment level you need met. You got every box you need checked. Georgia is the best job in the SEC right now. Alabama's the number 2 job. And the reason that I put them there is because it's more competitive right now in the SEC West, even if you are the alpha dog on the block in the SEC West. But see, if I'm a coach, all of these jobs are vacant. I'm not Nick Saban. I'm going there knowing that the benchmark is a couple of legends in Bryant and Saban. And so I may not be turned off by that, but it's a whole lot nicer to go to a place like Georgia where they haven't won a championship in recent memory than one where they've won so many they can't even hold them all in 2 hands. And so it can be uncomfortable if you don't have the right temperament. Nick Saban's unaffected by that stuff, but Nick Saban's also, I don't think, human. And so I'm human. I have a heart. I have feelings. At the same time, you got everything I need to win there too. So Alabama sitting there number 2, easily the best brand right now in the SEC. LSU is number 3. Scott Woodward goes a long way here. You get the right athletic director in the building, and then you get all those boxes like I'm talking about checked, and you look at their recent facility upgrades and the commitment level there, but you also look at the internal structure and dynamics changing. When Scott Woodward came to LSU, which by the way is home for him, just like it's home for Ed Orgeron, when you brought Scott Woodward back in, there was this retooling and rewiring internally, 95% of which you didn't see and you'll never notice as a fan, but you sure do notice the results on the field. A lot of that has to do with LSU being number 3 there. They can obviously recruit Louisiana better than anyone. They can very easily get into the Mobile area, Florida, and they can get into East Texas. And that's what separates, to me, as a job, LSU from Texas A&M, which I put at 4. So you can make an argument Texas A&M should be at number one. Like, there are none of these boxes that I keep talking about that A&M doesn't check. Maybe the tradition box, but like I said, you give me the facilities, you give me the recruiting base, you give me the finances to where I can put together a top-notch staff. I'm not worried about how many trophies we have in the case. I'm worried about how many I'm going to be able to put in there. But here's the difference with Texas A&M. Texas A&M and Texas have not made a concerted effort in the past to recruit nationally, with good reason. They're parked in a state called Texas. So the thinking there is, we got enough good talent right in our backyard, we don't need to leave the state. Well, that's partially true, but you can't just have a ton of talent. You have to have the right mixture of talent. There may be athletes in Georgia, for example, along the defensive line or offensive line that maybe aren't in plentiful supply in Texas. But I think for a long time, these programs didn't venture out of the boundary of their own state enough to where it's a little more effort for, let's say, Texas A&M to venture into these states than it is for LSU. If I'm the right coach, I change that, but by fractions of points, that's what put Texas A&M behind LSU. There is a limitless financial pool right now, and always will be, at Texas A&M. They're number one by 10 miles on this list when it comes to that. Beautiful stadium, beautiful facilities. They don't lack for anything there. They don't lack for anything whatsoever. Number 5 was Florida. I was talking to Bud Elliott about 2 programs on this list today. One of them was Florida. I'll tell you what the other one was in a second. The reason I put Florida down at 5, you certainly are parked in one of per capita the most talent-rich states in America. Pretty much everyone on this list at the top has that in common. So recruiting's not an issue there. Even if you don't have a staff that's capitalizing on that to a top 3 per year degree right now, the capability's there. If I'm an elite recruiter, I'm going to knock it out of the park at Florida. See Urban Meyer, years past, for example. The only reason that I drug my feet a little bit on Florida is because up until recently, Florida fans know all about this, up until recently, with the change at athletic director from Foley to Strickland, there was some dragging of the feet on facility enhancements there. Now, they finally got the yeses, and they finally got it done, and it could be that 3 or 4 years from now, once I can see things progress year over year, it may be that I say, all right, well, if Florida is in tune in this category and this category, I could justify putting them as high as number 3, number 2, but right now I kept them at number 5 there, only because they're playing catch up a little bit with things that they should have had taken care of already. I put Auburn at number 6. Think about the dynamic. I view this as the toughest job in major college football right now when you measure expectation to reality. The investment's not an issue. Auburn invests to a plenty high enough degree to win at the highest level. It's the expectation relative to the reality. Think about what history says Auburn should be. And again, I'm talking about taking the jobs today. Today, you've got possibly the greatest dynasty in the history of the sport in your own state at your arch rival in Alabama. Georgia is on the precipice of being a national championship team. LSU just won a national championship. What does history say Auburn should be right now? History says Auburn should be a total afterthought. They're not. I think that's one thing that makes Gus Malzahn very underrated. But number 2, that's why it bumps the Auburn job all the way down to 6 right now. I mean, I can go places and I can get paid equal to or more than I get paid at Auburn and not have to deal with those shark-infested waters. That is brutal, just ridiculous. And I don't know who in the world you take and put there that's doing a better job, that would take the job and do a better job annually than Gus Malzahn. So that's the current set of affairs there. And the 7th team, and this is the last team in the first cluster, is Tennessee. Tennessee has got to reestablish their brand. I told you branding is the 4th most important bit of criteria for me, but when you stay irrelevant for an entire generation on the national scene, you've got some reestablishing to do. That's the chore in front of Jeremy Pruitt right now. You see Tennessee's logo there, and then you see that Georgia logo. If I'm a recruit in high school, I know I can go to Georgia and compete. I've seen them do it in my lifetime. Obviously, I've seen Bama do it, LSU do it. I've seen A&M not so much do it. But I also know what A&M has over there, and I know it's in limitless supply. I have seen Florida do it in my lifetime. I hadn't seen Tennessee do it. And I haven't seen Tennessee be competitive a lot. Now, having said that, they obviously have the investment. They have the buy-in. They have nice facilities. None of these places in this top cluster are hurting for facilities, but you got to convince me to come there, or if I'm a coach, I got to convince you to come there over these programs, and that's a tough sell right now. establishing and reestablishing that brand that used to be for Tennessee, that's key in vaulting them up the ladder a few rungs right now. Now, that's the end of the first cluster. And the first cluster is essentially teams capable of winning a national championship. If things went right, like you may laugh at Tennessee and the concept of them winning a championship. No, not this year. I mean, if things were right, if you had the right guy in charge of that program for half a decade, Tennessee's in contention, as is Auburn, Florida, A&M, LSU, Bama, and Georgia. From 8 to 14, they're not. Probably right now, current state of affairs, everything goes right. 8 to 14, you're not winning a championship. But think about Kentucky. So this is the one I was talking about with Bud today. On the podcast, which was only 24 hours ago, I put Kentucky down at like 12 or 13. But Bud brings me a different perspective today. He was talking about the cushy nature of the job that Mark Stoops has. And they've done some writing on this over at Banner Society. And it's really eye-opening. You know, you're making, just to give you an idea, Mark Stoops right now is making about as much as Nick Saban made when he was hired at Alabama originally. He's making between $4.5 and $5 million a year for the expectation of winning, about 7 games a year. Win 7 or 8 games a year. There's an extension clause in his contract if he wins 7 per year. But what you're totally alleviated of is the expectation level. I mean, that's it. Win 7, win 8 a year, take us to a decent bowl game, we're happy. You get to live in Lexington, Kentucky. Not a bad place to live. So all things considered, if you're not in the championship contention cluster, which I don't think 8 through 14 is there a better job? I was convinced of this. I changed my mind about that today. So Kentucky at 8 and South Carolina at 9. You know, South Carolina is kind of in Auburn's position, but from an investment level, from a resource level, probably a notch below Auburn. But when I say they're in their position, the expectation there is compete against Georgia and compete against Florida and compete against Tennessee. The difference is, whereas at Auburn, you know, the resource level by default and by necessity in the West is probably up a couple of notches. You know, even with recent additions at South Carolina, it's not on par with what they have at Georgia, obviously. And so it's tough, last year notwithstanding, tough to compete on a year in, year out basis. And from 10 to 14, I didn't even take a stand on the Mississippi schools. I know it said 10 and 11. They're interchangeable. I didn't even rank one over the other. And Missouri, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt rounded out 12 through 14. But you guys, obviously, there will be a lot of consternation and debate about that. You let me know in the comment section what you think. But here's what I ask. I don't mind you telling me I'm wrong, and this is a matter of opinion. I don't know that you can be wrong or right. I don't mind that. Give me logic-based counterpoints. I don't need to hear you're an idiot, Y-O-U-R, and then that's it, and you're gone. You tell me I'm wrong all you want to. Let me know why, and let me know what you think. That's what a comment section is for. That's why God invented them.